Attorney General Eric Holder.
I am concerned that the size of some of these institutions becomes so large that it does become difficult for us to prosecute them when we are hit with indications that if you do prosecute, if you do bring a criminal charge, it will have a negative impact on the national economy, perhaps even the world economy. And I think that is a function of the fact that some of these institutions have become too large.
The institutions in question there are very, very large banks, including HSBC, which was doing a lot of drug laundering. And Holder is not the first person to express this concern. A few weeks ago on this program, we showed you this.
Tell me a little bit about the last few times you've taken the biggest financial institutions on Wall Street all the way to a trial.
We do not have to bring people to in a trial or
well, I appreciate that you say you don't have to bring them to trial. My question is, when did you bring them to trial?
We have not had to do it as a practical matter to achieve our supervisory goals.
I will have to get back to you with the specific information.
I'm really concerned that too big to fail has become too big for trial. That just seems wrong to me.
So there you have the Attorney General and two federal regulators explaining why they don't like to take banks to trial. But in a way, Holder's answer was the clearer one. The regulator said simply, we didn't want to do it, we just didn't do it, we didn't need to do it. Holder clarified, the Attorney General of the United States, a pretty powerful guy, said that banks are too big, that when you try to bring a criminal charge, it is too difficult to do, and plus, you're discouraged by people saying it would rattle world markets. But if these banks are truly too big to jail, that means they are too big to truly hold accountable. It also means they are too big to scare, and that can be very dangerous. And finally, it sounds like it means they might actually be too big to exist. Joining me now is Felix Salmon, finance blogger for Reuters, and former New York Governor and Attorney General Eliot Spitzer, who prosecuted many cases in the financial sector. Governor, let me start with you. Do you buy what Holder is saying here? Is there such a thing as too big to jail?
No, he's wrong at so many different levels, but I give him credit for honesty because he finally explained to us why this administration and his Department of Justice has been an abject failure, as is the SEC, when it comes to enforcing the rules of integrity in the marketplace. They're afraid. They're afraid, they're terrified, they're out-negotiated, they're wrong, they're not too big to jail, they're not too big to prosecute. This, unfortunately, is what this Department of Justice believes, and as a consequence, we now not only guarantee the deposits, we guarantee the returns, we give a zone of immunity, and we have created these behemoths that simply are too big, they should be broken up, and I think that is the logical conclusion of his statement, but he's afraid to articulate it.
Felix, you've written before when the HSBC verdict came down that while people want to see criminal prosecution brought and folks brought to jail, that it actually may just not be the best thing, it may just not accomplish anything. So where do you fall on this?
So, I half agree with the governor that, yes, the banks should be broken up so they are small enough to prosecute, but so long as they are too big to fail, and there are many too big to fail systemically important institutions in the world and in the US, at that point, I think the Attorney General is right. They are too big to prosecute. If you prosecute them and you win a prosecution, they lose their banking license. If they lose their banking license, they basically have to close down. We know what happens when banks close in a chaotic manner. We saw that with Lehman Brothers, which was actually relatively small by the standards of HSBC. And, you know, you would wind up throwing tens of thousands of people out of their jobs, throwing the entire financial sector into disarray, and trying to mop up that would be a hell of a lot harder than the consequences of simply finding out.
I think that Felix is portraying a perspective in a world of gloom and doom that would not eventuate. There is a rational way to say to a major bank, an HSBC, that is a recidivist, and I have argued that we should do with Wall Street institutions what we do with street felons. 3 strikes and you're out. Some sort of recidivist theory, which works in the world of criminal prosecution as a deterrent. Say to them, if we have our 3rd prosecution, our 3rd guilty plea, we will take you and we will restructure you. We will sell off the pieces of the bank. We're not throwing thousands of people out of work. We're taking the pieces of your institution, dismembering it, and giving it to other financial institutions that will fill the void. When Arthur Andersen was prosecuted, we haven't had any trouble getting other accountants to step into the void. The world has not failed to have accountants. There are ways to mitigate the collateral consequences, and if we do not say to these institutions, you will be prosecuted, then they will sense the immunity. HSBC had the most sophisticated money laundering ever seen, and they feel as though they were not sanctioned whatsoever. These corporations want the rights of individuals without the responsibilities of individuals, and we've given it to them.
Well, I think Arthur Andersen is actually a good case. I think they shouldn't have been prosecuted.
Now, Arthur Andersen is the accounting firm that was at the center of Enron. I just want to clarify.
And in hindsight, in fact, they were prosecuted for something they didn't do. It reduced the number of big accounting companies from 5 to 4, and it basically achieved nothing except for having less competition in the accounting world. I love the idea, in theory, that we could create a system like this, but there's actually something easier we can do before we do that, which is criminal prosecutions of executives. Now, I mean, it's difficult to get prosecutions in criminal cases, but that we can try harder at without having to dismantle the entire organization.
I agree with Phillips on that. I'm not saying these are not mutually exclusive choices. Having been a prosecutor, you have a range from the civil to the criminal against individuals and against the organization, the entity, and certainly you prosecute individuals as well, as we did. But the entity itself needs, as corporations have, or these legal fictions need to be held accountable. Otherwise, as Eric Holder says, they simply perpetuate and go on forever.
There is this now bipartisan bill from Senators David Vitter, a Louisiana Republican, and Senator Sherrod Brown, an Ohio Democrat, to break up the big banks. And the mechanisms change from bill to bill. I haven't looked at this one recently. But do you think, Felix, we have the actual ability to do that without just roiling world financial markets? Do you think we can do that in a way that the aftermath is survivable and better than what we have now?
Yes, I think banks can be broken up. It's not something we have a lot of experience doing, and so you would get a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth from Wall Street, but really the obstacles to it are more political and institutional than they are practical. If you have the will, they're half doing it in the UK with this thing called Vickers, where they're basically telling the banks to break themselves in half and run themselves as two separate operations. A lot of banks, Citigroup more or less broke itself in half. Banks do this voluntarily all the time, so we could force them to do it.
Felix, Governor Spitzer, I would love to keep talking about this. I'm sorry we can't. Thank you both for being here.